China's worldview can be summed up in four simple words. China is the best. The best of what, you may ask? Why, the best of everything. The epitome of civilization, the pinnacle of technology, the ideal system of government, the highest sense of morality, the finest of the arts, the greatest thinkers, the most beautiful women, the most skilled craftsmen, and of course it goes without saying, the most delicious food. In this lecture, we'll explore how China came to think of itself as the greatest place on earth. Now, most people think of their own country as a pretty great place, but for China, this goes beyond a question of simple patriotism. China has only existed as what we view as a Westphalian nation-state really since the founding of the People's Republic of China, or PRC, in 1949. For much of its history, China is better thought of as a civilization. The word China itself is of Western origin, loosely derived from the last major Chinese dynasty, the Qing, which slowly declined and was ultimately overthrown in 1911. The term the Chinese use today is Zhongguo, which translates as middle country or middle kingdom. This term is useful for foreigners to understand that China has generally seen itself as the center of civilization. A more ancient term that is still used in the formal name of both the PRC and the Republic of China, or ROC, also known as Taiwan, is Zhonghua, which roughly translates as central splendor. Not exactly what you would think of as a geographic term. You would be correct. China is properly seen, and thought of by its inhabitants, as more of a civilization than a geographic entity. John McCain once joked that Russia was a gas station masquerading as a country, and The Economist magazine referred to India as a continent masquerading as a country. China can best be thought of as a civilization masquerading as a country. To underscore this point, China often talks about itself as having 5,000 years of uninterrupted history, and of being one of the key ancient civilizations of the world, along with Egypt and Greece. Now, of course, there are other ancient civilizations that might take issue with this exclusive club, and in fact, the 5,000-year uninterrupted history claim is also a stretch. Most scholars see the ancient Shang and Xia dynasties as little more than mythical creations, and the archaeological records suggest at least two distinct remains of early civilizations, one in present-day Sichuan and another in present-day Henan. There are also abundant records of other peoples, tribes, and nomadic groups within the borders of present-day China, such as the Zhuang, Mongols, Manchus, Tibetans, and Uyghurs, to name a few, of the 55 officially recognized minority groups. Early DNA studies revealed that even the Han Chinese people, which make up 92% of China's current population, were most likely two distinct ethnic groups, with distinct differences between those living north of the Yangtze and those living to the south. But research in May of 2019, published in the online journal Molecular Biology and Evolution, suggests the lower reaches of the Yangtze and Pearl Rivers, as well as the Yellow River, gave rise to genetically separate groups about 10,000 years ago. Those ancestors then mingled to become the Han, the largest ethnic group in the world today. In addition, among the Han, there are some 255 different dialects spoken. Nevertheless, the multiple origins, multiple peoples story doesn't suit the narrative that the current regime is pushing. So, 5,000 years of uninterrupted history it is. James Millward of Georgetown University put it this way: the political history of continental East Asia involves a multiplicity of kingdoms, some, but not all, now considered a part of Chinese history. Their rulers were of various ethnicities and spoke different languages. Their states occupied many different areas of what is now the People's Republic of China, often concurrently and inimically with other states. This drama is not so different from that of the past 2,500 years of monarchies and empires in Europe. Yet because in the 20th century the Chinese Communist Party managed to assemble a territory of imperial scale, while Europe consists presently of distinct polities, we now discuss China as if it were a single continuous political entity with 5,000 years of history, and see modern China as immanent in the parade of Chinese dynasties, an imperial chrysalis from which the People's Republic of China, the CCP party state, unfolded like a butterfly after millenniums of moltings. Extremely well put. Thank you, Professor Millward. And now back to our What is China slide. The territory of what we now call China also hasn't always been under unified political control, although that has been true more often than not since 221 BC, when the famed first Qin emperor completed his conquest of the other 6 warring states and imposed uniformity of weights, measures, character usage, chariot widths, and the like. This immense effort to build the empire took its toll, however, and the Qin dynasty barely lasted 2 years after the emperor's death in 210 BC. Nevertheless, when the Han dynasty came to power a few years later, it was able to consolidate Qin's gains and establish the tradition of dynastic rule over China, which lasted on and off through 1911. Even then, the power of the dynasties was traditionally weak, and China's history is beset by periods of civil war and invasion. In fact, 2 of the most famous dynasties, the Yuan and the Qing, were foreign dynasties established after the conquest of China by the Mongols and Manchus, respectively. With its vast territory, geographic diversity, and hundreds of dialects, China could have just as easily ended up resembling Europe. Reflecting this reality is the Chinese saying, 分久必合, 合久必分. That which is long divided must unify. That which is long unified must divide. The current regime sees itself as the inheritor of the dynastic mantle. The desire to complete China's unification, i.e. by reclaiming Taiwan, and prevent it from dividing again is a major task of the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP. So if you hear someone from China saying something about the uninterrupted 5,000-year history, what they are really doing is expressing pride in China, which is okay. Again, the greatness of China is a powerful narrative, and 5,000 years of history sounds a lot better than, it's complicated. One of the foundations of China's sense of superiority was the tributary system. In the metaphysical justification for dynastic rule, the Chinese empire represented Tian Xia, all under heaven, and the right to rule was Tian Ming, or the mandate of heaven, and the emperor himself was known as Tianzi, or the son of heaven. The tributary system started developing as early as the Western Han dynasty in 102 BC and became more formalized during the Tang dynasty, which lasted from 618 to 907 AD. It was essentially a system of relationships in East Asia focused on China that facilitated trade and foreign relations by acknowledging China's predominant role in East Asia. The other nations would periodically send tributary envoys to China, who would kowtow. That's 3 prostrations and 9 head knocks on the floor, for those keeping score at home, in front of the emperor to present gifts and acknowledge him as the son of heaven. In some cases, those gaining the emperor's favor could use it to strengthen their own claim to rule back at home. But for the most part, the surrounding countries paid tribute in order to placate their more powerful neighbor, and essentially saw it as the cost of doing business with China, something modern companies know something about. At home, these countries didn't accept China's claims of superiority, nor their status as vassals, and they maintained their autonomy and independence. But inside China, such tribute missions were evidence that all other countries accepted the innate superiority of China and stood in awe of her splendor. Many years ago, I was having lunch with a diplomat from an Asian country who shared that his embassy, which was preparing for a visit from a princess to Beijing, had received an elaborate marriage proposal from a peasant in Yunnan province to present to the princess. The diplomat remarked that this reflected how China viewed those from surrounding countries, that in their mind, a common Chinese peasant was worthy of a royal bride from another country. I should make quick mention of one leader in particular, Emperor Taizong, the second emperor of the Tang dynasty, who ruled from 626 to 649 AD. Interest in Taizong has become increasingly relevant since Xi Jinping came to power, for reasons I will discuss later. The Chinese consider Emperor Taizong to be one of the greatest emperors in Chinese history, and his is the standard by which future emperors, or any Chinese leader for that matter, are measured. His reign is considered a golden age in ancient China. Think of the fictional Camelot in England, or the reign of Louis XIV in France. Under his rule, China flourished economically and militarily. Taizong was a brilliant strategist and military commander, and ruthless in his pursuit of power, ambushing and killing 2 of his brothers, and ultimately deposing his father to become emperor. He subsequently executed several of his own sons who he saw as threats. He also had a bit of a modernist streak. Unlike many of the nobility of his time, Emperor Taizong was a frank rationalist and scholar of logic and scientific reason, openly scorning superstitions and claims of signs from the heavens. The modern Chinese historian Bo Yang opined that Emperor Taizong achieved greatness by enduring criticism that others would find difficult to accept, while trying hard not to abuse his absolute power. China enjoyed prosperity and relative peace for more than a century after Taizong's death because he was able to unify China and pacify the vast regions surrounding China, including modern Mongolia, Korea, Siberia, Vietnam, Xinjiang, and Central Asian regions as far as Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, including the ancient city of Samarkand. In our next lecture, I'll cover some additional cultural factors that continue to influence China's worldview.